Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Monday, November 25th, 2024. I'm your host, George Kurt, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. All right, Cody, third week in a row. Did you get Saquon this week?
I did not get Barkley. I did
Hey.
not. I don't have Barkley in any shares either. It was a guy I was trying to trade for, but I couldn't get anyone to give him up. And after the last couple of weeks, like it looks like a no-brainer. Like all my deals look awful. And one heck of a game for Saquon. And I want to get your thoughts. I know you're an Eagles fan, so you might be a little bit biased. Is he entering the MVP conversation?
I think he has to be. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to win it just because, it's a quarterback award.
There,
Last time we saw a non-quarterback win was, 10 years ago or more? But the man's on pace for well over 2,000 all-purpose yards at this point. The only thing that's holding him down is the touchdowns that are being taken at the 1-yard line by Jalen Hurts.
yeah, I think I saw he needs 118 yards per game over the last 6 games to break 2,000 rushing yards.
And that's
And
rushing. That's not counting the receiving yards he's got on the year, which I believe is between 300 and 400.
right. So my thing is we saw Derrick Henry get 2,000 rushing yards. That didn't turn into an MVP season, but there was elite quarterback play, like super efficient. I think Rodgers won that with like 45 and 5. If I have my years in a row, there
I think
hasn't
so.
been a quarterback that has separated themselves from the pack. We say Josh Allen because he's doing what he's been doing. I mean, Lamar Jackson is having another really good year. But even last year, like some question, like how much of that was a true MVP season. And I think it's an interesting conversation. And man, if he wins MVP and Xavier McKinney could win Defensive Player of the Year, like the Giants GM just has to be feeling himself.
Seriously. I mean, every week, I don't know if it's just because I'm, on a bunch of Eagles pages and stuff, you see so many things going around of the Giants owner and Hard Knocks, just like, if Saquon goes to Philly, I'm going to be sick. And then it's just like, well, he's got to be even more sick the longer this season goes because it keeps getting worse. We have more Giants talk to hit as we go on with this as well. So it's I feel like we're gonna be piling on the Giants in this episode, but you got a great point there when it comes to MVP slash offensive player of the year and defensive player of the year. But join the conversation if you are here. Make sure you drop your questions or comments in the chat. You can find us live Mondays and Thursdays at 6:30. This week will be Monday and Wednesday at 6:30, thanks to the holiday. So make sure you find us on Wednesday night. And you can always drop in our DMs. We are at the Couch DMs on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. But Cody, why don't we continue this discussion? Sit back, relax. Let's chat. We could have just kept going from that intro, but I felt like I had to give the little drop there before we kept going. More Giants news. I think this broke after we had our conversation last week, but
It did.
Daniel Jones was officially released by the New York Giants after playing scout team safety for a whole 1 day in practice. And he, as of Monday at 4:00 East, cleared waivers. So he is now free to sign with any team that he wishes. And he wants to go to a contender, obviously to back up. But what do you think about the potential landing spots for Daniel Jones?
Yeah, I mean, I think we debated last week about like, do they just send him home a la Derek Carr, say you're going to be on the team, but stay away from the team. And he finally just got cut. And it's been crazy how like Brian Daboll even came out and was like, I didn't expect that to happen after we sat him down. Like they didn't expect the snowball effect for this one. But to your question on which teams does he have the best opportunity to go to? I know there's been some rumblings about the Vikings or the Ravens, they're contenders. And, Sam Darnold is still the ultimate question mark. Like, he's been playing great all season long, looks great with Kevin O'Connell, has been a little bit banged up, hasn't missed any time, but gets, a nick here and there. So that one seems like a lot of sense. And then the Ravens, Lamar Jackson's injury history, they don't have Tyler Huntley now that he's down in Miami. You'd have to question Miami because of the whole Tua Tagovailoa situation as they still fight their way back into a potential playoff spot.
Yeah.
So those seem like the top 3 for me. And then if I was to give like some non-contenders, I think you have to throw the Raiders out there after Gardner Minshew is knocked out for the season with a broken collarbone. Or if he wanted to do like I'm going home to North Carolina with the Carolina Panthers. Bryce Young's been playing great, but if he wanted to go home for a little bit, then that would be like the super dark horse. But I don't see that one happening.
Mostly because they still have Andy Dalton there, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he's on IR or anything, so he'd kind of go there and be like a number 3 quarterback. It just doesn't seem to make much sense. Also worth noting, you mentioned this before the show, Cody. There's a chance that he's going to sign with a team to the practice squad, to give him flexibility to be able to sign elsewhere if an injury occurs. So, example, if he goes to Baltimore, signs with the practice squad, then you do see a Sam Darnold injury, you could see him then get signed off the practice squad to Minnesota or any situation like that. So that's something to keep an eye on as well as he goes through the process.
100%. And I think that makes the most sense too. Go to situation that you like, but then keep your options open because we're past the trade deadline. People aren't just going to cut quarterbacks this late. So let him keep his options open, get a little bit of control. And I also think too, like a team like Minnesota, we talked about this last week. If like they might need a stopgap quarterback between JJ McCarthy getting healthy and Sam Darnold wanting a contract extension after the year he played, which he would deserve. Would you run it back, with Daniel Jones, like bring Daniel Jones in for the last month and a half of the season, get him in the system? Could you have him start the season for JJ McCarthy and potentially resurrect his career a la a Sam Darnold? So the Vikings seem like the most logical fit, but we'll have to see how it plays out.
Exactly. And then the only reason I think he would go to a non-contender is if he sees a long-term outlook with them. So like if he goes to the Raiders with the hopes that he signs a contract there, but I don't see that happening necessarily. But something else that just he's got to be thinking about when it comes to long-term.
Yeah, I think so. And going to a non-contender is also tough because we never know which coaches are going to stay. Like, is Antonio Pierce safe in Las Vegas? Does he go? I mean, obviously, it doesn't seem like Brian Daboll is going to. I mean, it's been up in the air. Originally, it sounded like he was safe one more year because they've been quick trigger to let people go. But after all this fallout, he might be out. So, like, just never know which coaches are going to be there to place a factor into it.
Exactly. So going to a contender, you have a lot more stability there as well. Plenty more to talk about from this slate of games on Sunday. But I wanted to start with the matchup you probably watch pretty closely. The San Francisco 49ers and Green Bay Packers. Specifically on the 49ers side, you saw some rumblings going on today about Kyle Shanahan potentially being on the hot seat.
No, so like I started to see these like 2 weeks ago, and I just was like, oh, they're just fans being annoying kind of thing. Um, Although the 49ers would be another spot for Daniel Jones after we saw them not have Brock Purdy this past week. But yeah, the 49ers, they are, they dropped to 5-6. They dropped to like 18% chance to make the playoffs now, according to some metrics.
Got some help from Seattle, though.
They did, but Seattle took the lead and they already lost to Seattle as well, too. So like
Better
it
2 games instead of a game and a tie break is still better, but yes.
it's still essentially 2 games, but that's here say or not. But a lot of rumblings. I think Bleacher Report put it out like as a question, like, is Kyle Shanahan on the hot seat? Has he essentially run his course? They've been to the Super Bowl, 3 times under him now without a win. The team is kind of falling apart. Deebo Samuel's having a down year. The roster's getting older. So to me, when I hear this, I'm like, that's crazy. He would be the most sought after coach. It'd be him, Ryan Johnson of the Detroit Lions, like the 2 biggest names in the coaches, if he were to be let go. But has his course come to an end? Similar to how we saw, like, Mike McCarthy with the Packers, or, we've seen other Andy Reid with the Eagles, right? Like, never really got him over I think that's a good comparison. Could he go on to somewhere else? Could Kyle Shanahan go resurrect the Cincinnati Bengals? Like, that would be a heck of a lot of fun with him and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. But, like, does the 49ers – I don't think the 49ers ultimately do this, but I think it's more of a – I think there's definitely fire to the smoke, so to speak.
Yeah, so I'm trying to go back and just kind of see like how teams finished with, very successful coaches. And the Eagles was the first thing that came to my mind. Back in the Andy Reid era, he was fired after the 2012 season. But before that, 2009 lost a wild card game. 2010 lost a wild card game. 2011 8-8 missed the playoffs. 2012 4-12 missed the playoffs. There was like consecutive years of a downfall going on there in Philly. This man just had his team in the Super Bowl and lost last year. The fact that we're saying we could go from a Super Bowl appearance to being fired in the matter of 1 year seems kind of crazy to me from somebody who's had so much success. It's not like this is a one-time run. He kind of got lucky or he was lifted by a roster. No, I think we seem to consider him to be a top 5 NFL coach at this point. He just hasn't been able to get over the hump.
At least a top 5 play caller.
Oh yeah, 100% at least that. But so I could see there being rumblings of like, he get out of this season, it was not good. If he has a bad season next year, he's definitely on the hot seat. But I think it would be a major overreaction to go from, a Super Bowl appearance last year to just being out right away.
How long was Doug Peterson out?
Doug Peterson. So it was Super Bowl in 2017, lost a divisional game in 18, wild card game in 19, and then was fired after 2020 in a 4-11 season.
So 3 seasons post winning the Super Bowl.
3 seasons post winning the Super Bowl. It was 2 9-7s and a 4-11, which obviously the 49ers could have a very rough end of the season, but they already have more than 4 wins also.
Yeah, I think it's just an interesting case study. I just think it's just a bad luck. I don't think it ultimately happens, right? Again, if he does, he's the number one name everybody's going to go after for a head coach. As I sit here and think about it, I would love to see what he could do with Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. I think Chase Brown would be electric in that run offense. They would fix that offensive line. Like, that'd be a heck of a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think the 49ers end up doing it, but I can send you the tweet thread of 49er fans are like, yeah, we're done. We're tired. And I don't know if that's just like because there's the losses in the Super Bowl that make it like, okay, well, he can't get us over the hump, a la Andy Reid, like in Philadelphia. Like, I think that's the most interesting comparison. And I do think if he does move on from San Fran, he could go to somewhere and be successful down the line.
Let me also say this to 49ers fans who may be listening to this show. There's a lot of Eagles fans that didn't appreciate the run that Andy Reid had in Philly until he was gone. And I mean, it ended at a point where it was like, yeah, no, his time's passed. It was definitely time to move on. But then they looked back at that 2001 to 2008 stretch and didn't appreciate the way that they did, even though they didn't get over the hump. So give it a chance to see if it rebounds is the way I'm looking at it. And appreciate where you're at, where you have it.
Yeah, definitely. And you could say that about every fan base. You want to win now and you just don't appreciate what you have. Everyone can say the same thing. But more about this game in how it played out. Like, missing Nick Bosa was noticeable. Missing Brock Purdy was noticeable. Brandon Allen, I thought, played pretty well, all things considered. He had a couple nice throws. He did have the ricochet interception and the sack fumble, which just, when you have a backup quarterback, those are the things you can't overcome. And then no Trent Williams, I think, also affected the run game. I mean, Christian McCaffrey had only 30 yards on 11 attempts. Granted, they went down 17-0 pretty quick. They were able to get back into the game. But it did sound like Brock Purdy was throwing on Monday. So maybe they'll get him back this week. And because of the division they're in, like they're a long shot for the wild card. But if they can get hot, and this team has the pieces, we've seen it before, they can still make the playoffs. And I don't think anybody wants to play a San Fran in the playoffs.
Exactly, because they're the team that has done it before, can get hot, and I still think they're getting healthier. I heard today that they're activating the practice window on Dre Greenlaw, who we kind of forgot about him and how dominant he was, and he tore his Achilles in the playoffs, or was it the Super Bowl last year?
Super Bowl, like running onto the field.
Yeah, and now he's going to be coming back probably in the next 2 weeks. So there's another big boost to a defense that was already banged up. Their offense has been banged up. Like there's still room for growth with this team.
Yeah, it just, is it too late? That's the question we'll have to wait and try to find out.
Yep. Could be the most dangerous 7 seed we've seen in the NFL in a while. Wanted to start there because that was such a big thing, but I want to kick it back to Thursday really quick. Another great opening interview with Jameis Winston. talking about playing in the snow as the Steelers went to Cleveland to play the Browns. And then Jameis comes out there and despite a key interception in the fourth quarter, leads the Browns to a victory. That was an entertaining game.
It was good. The weather was great. I anyone that says football games should be played in a dome, I don't know what you're talking about. How can you watch that game and think anything otherwise? And then Jameis Winston, like he's been one of the most entertaining people to follow this season. Not saying he's played great. They've won a couple games, like in terms of, but his interviews, his aura, his presence, kind of like breathing life back into the Browns after all the Deshaun Watson struggles to begin the season has been fun to watch. And you kind of just want to root for the guy just to see what he says next. So that was a great game. Shout out to the Browns for beating the Steelers. The Steelers come off beating the Ravens, lose to the Browns. The NFL makes no sense.
You know what makes also no sense, and something I've just been thinking about over the last few days? The Browns make the mistake of getting rid of Baker Mayfield. He goes through a couple of teams, ends up in Tampa Bay, replacing Tom Brady, who replaced Jameis Winston. He went through a couple of teams and ended up in Cleveland. If he keeps performing well, do they, in the draft, fill like a best player available, another need, roll another year with Jameis Winston, see if they can almost right their wrong, get another quarterback who may be rebounding as a veteran, and see if they can make something out of this team?
I mean, I think you're pulling that stuff right there. Like, I don't know how they get rid of Deshaun Watson. Like, that contract is nuclear, or like for their, like they would have to play with like basically.
This isn't a Daniel Jones, $22 million cap hit.
No, like even next year, like to get out of that, like it'd be like $150 million in dead cap. Like Deshaun Watson's going to be there. Can they keep Jameis cheap to do a competition or start him on PUP? Like there's a lot of things. I don't think the Browns are in the quarterback market even in the draft for this year. The following year, I still don't even know if they can get out of the contract then because of that fully guaranteed structure. Like it's crazy on how bad the Browns could be with this whole Deshaun Watson situation. But to your point, Jameis has looked good. It'll be fun to watch him if he gets an opportunity in Cleveland next year. I think that'd be great. Hopefully when Netflix announces whatever show they're going to have this offseason, hopefully it's quarterback 2, and Jameis Winston was picked to be one of the quarterbacks they followed.
If they did that and picked a backup quarterback, that'd be very interesting, but I'd be entertained just following him around in whatever he does.
I mean, based off of how they did receiver, I feel like they didn't pick him until later in the season, and they used NFL films and interviews to piece the beginning of the season together. So
that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah. So not to get too nerdy about how TV shows are made, Jameis Winston's just a fun guy that you love watching all the clips about.
Very true. Moving on. Looking at last night, we talked about getting Saquon or getting Barkley, however you want to say it. Eagles establishing dominance against the LA Rams. And we've been talking about the Lions a lot. Obviously, one loss team. And if they're peaking too soon, are we going to start having the same conversation about the Eagles with how good they've looked over the last 6 weeks?
I mean, I think you're always going to have those conversations. And you're going to start to be like, well, who do they play? What were those games like? Have they faced adversity? The same conversations you're going to have against, the Detroit Lions. At the end of the day, the Eagles are playing great. They're, they look elite. It looks like we're destined for a, Eagles Lions NFC Championship game, which would be a heck of a lot of fun. All that to say, though, is I know we talk about, man, the season's almost over. There's 2 weeks left of the fantasy football playoffs. There are still 5 weeks left in the regular season for the NFL. A lot can change. We're talking about the Eagles. I think Collinsworth brought it up last night. Like, although they went on to win the Super Bowl, right? Because they were talking about MVP. Carson Wentz looked like the MVP of the league towards ACL 3 weeks left. Eagles started to fall apart a little bit. He didn't win MVP because he missed the last 3 games. Nick Foles won on a historic run. So, but like these teams change. A lot of things can change. You know, the Lions are what? They're 10-1 now.
Yep.
What happened? What team was 10-1 last year and then finished 10-6?
Them same Eagles.
So,
and I know it's not as significant, but worth noting the Lions potentially lost David Montgomery for some time.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. I think he even came back for a little bit, or at least put his pads back on. When you see a player leave without pads and it comes back with pads on, you feel a little bit better. So
Fair.
I think David Montgomery will be just fine. They might ease up his workload because of where they're at in their situation. But no, this Eagles team looks great. The Rams came back to earth a little bit after a couple strong weeks. But yeah, the Eagles are fun to watch right now.
And I don't think this is a bump in the road for Rams, and it does hurt because they had a chance to be in a 3-way tie for leading their division. They're in a very similar situation in San Francisco now, but they've had a lot to look up to over the last 6 weeks. I think they're now 5 of their last 6 that they've won. So, still a good chance that the Rams can keep making a run here as well. They've looked a lot better since they've gotten back Kupp and Nakua.
Yeah, I'm pulling up right now because I think this NFC West is going to be extremely fun to watch down the stretch.
A lot of games against each other still to go. I'm pretty sure all of them have at least one game against everyone else in the division still left.
So the 49ers only have to play the Rams and the Cardinals. They've played both games against the Seahawks already.
Okay, my bad.
No, you're good. But like the 49ers, they got the Bills this coming week on Sunday Night Football. Then they have the Bears, who've been playing better as of late. Then a division against the Rams, Dolphins, Lions, Cardinals. Like that stretch is
There's not an easy game in there.
That's for the 49ers. The Rams, it's a little bit easier because you get the Saints, despite them playing really good going into their bye. Then they get the Bills, the 49ers, the Jets. That one's probably the easy one. Then the Cardinals and the Seahawks. So they have, 3 of their last 4 games are against the division. That's where they can make up some ground. So those 2 teams, probably were like some of like the favorites in that division coming into the season. Definitely have a long uphill battle to make it in the playoffs as we come down the stretch here.
Man, I'm worried more about the 49ers after hearing that schedule too. That's a brutal one.
What if they finish with 5 wins? Hey, let's just give them one. One of the last 5. They finished 6-11. You think Kyle Shanahan's on the hot seat then to go back to that conversation?
I think that seat's getting pretty warm, but I'd still be shocked if he goes.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think at the end of the day, if he goes, that's crazy to me. Outside of like egos getting in the way, which I think him and John Lynch, their GM, has a good working relationship. But like if there's always been buzz, like is it Kyle? Was it John? Like if John would be like, well, look, it's not Kyle, it's the team I put around, and go get someone else. But they've came in together. I think that they're in it for the long haul.
There's a better chance that Sean McVay goes, and I only say that because he's hinted at retirement a couple of times.
Yeah, I still think he retires, then comes back in a couple of years.
I could see that point too. Just that he takes time to spend with his family and then comes back because he hits the itch.
Yeah. Takes a hiatus, something like that for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, that's way off topic. Best team in the NFL, at least record-wise, I guess tied, had a scare against the Carolina Panthers of all teams as the Chiefs survive on a walk-off field goal. That game caught me by surprise this week.
It did. Tell me why.
Because the Chiefs continue to play like a 5-6 win team and play down to their opponents, yet somehow find a way to win every single week. I don't understand how this keeps happening. They still don't have a run game. I mean, we're obviously sitting here saying Isaiah Pacheco was close to coming back this week. Maybe there's a chance that there should be a chance he's back next week, and that could solve some issues. But you just haven't seen consistency throughout the whole offense. The run game's just not been explosive. The passing game, they're just lacking wide receivers. Their number one receiver was Xavier Worthy for a whole 4 for 46. The tight ends can only do so much. Like, honestly, there's some tight ends. There's some teams that can kind of survive on the tight end. It seems like the Ravens are the first team that comes to mind all the time when you talk about that. But Kelsey is good. He's kind of taken a step back from what you can tell. Noah Gray had a big game with 2 touchdowns, but still, like, when you're going into a game against the Panthers, as well as they've been playing lately, and you're a team like the Chiefs, you can't let a game like this happen. And maybe we would let it slide if they haven't been in some close games and kind of been struggling so far. But when you see that they've been clawing out barely and been not looking well pretty much the entire season, then you have the Panthers do that to you, it's just a warning flag, in my opinion.
I hear you, but I disagree.
Okay.
I'm not concerned about it. I was talking to a coworker today about this game, and we were talking about how we've been so accustomed to the Chiefs looking pretty, being fun football to watch, when really in the last year, outside of the playoff run and all of this year, they play football like the Pittsburgh Steelers. They don't it doesn't look good. You don't understand it, but at the end of the day, they just win games. And that's kind of where we're at with Kansas City. Like, yeah, it's the Panthers. The Panthers had one of their best games ever, made it close. But you know what? A minute and a half left. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to walk you right down and score. Like, was there ever a doubt once he got the ball back? Nope. And I think that's just what we're at with the Chiefs now. Maybe if they get Pacheco back, get more of a run game, can do some more play action stuff. Can they get hot down the stretch? Like, it wasn't a trap game because they got the Raiders next, unless you're just thinking divisional and overlooked the Carolina Panthers, but like it wasn't a true trap game. I just think, the Kansas City Chiefs are basically the Pittsburgh Steelers, but thank God we got that game on Christmas.
That's a good point. I mean, I hadn't thought of it that way. It's probably because the defense has been leading them. I get it. And it is an ugly way to win football games, but for whatever reason, this year feels worse than last year.
I mean, they were very disjointed, but over the last month, Patrick Mahomes has been more effective, less interceptions, like they're starting to find their groove. Like they haven't found it yet, but this team is going to hit, those last 3 weeks, and I'll be like, oh, here we go again.
I could see it. I was trying to pull up their schedule really quick.
All right, it's Raiders, Chargers, Browns, Texans. Sounds like 4 wins right there. Then the Steelers on Christmas Day, which that one should be fun. And then they end with the Broncos, which I think potentially could be flexed into Sunday Night Football if we're looking far ahead. Broncos win and get in. Chiefs win, clinch the bye. That's how I'm going to go.
Depending on how the Bills play out. Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, a lot of winnable games there. The Chargers are going to give them a run for their money because they're another team that doesn't play pretty, but just plays good football.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Texans would really have to start turning it around because there's so much potential on that team, but they've just been struggling.
Yeah, I think that Chargers-Chiefs game, again, not to get too far, we got a lot more games to talk about, being a Sunday night game at Arrowhead could be a welcome to the, hey, this Chargers teams might make some noise in the playoffs, like if they can get in the way they're playing. Mm-hmm. Let the national audience see them.
I agree. A lot of people haven't been watching that Chargers team too closely. Obviously, Chargers playing the game tonight as well. And we'll talk about that Monday night game as we keep moving through here. A game that affected your division a whole lot, Cody. Vikings-Bears. What an ending we had to that game where the Vikings go up 11 with less than 2 minutes in the game. And not only do the Bears go down, score a touchdown, get 2, they recover an onside kick and send it to overtime.
Yeah, that game was wild. I was hoping the Bears pulled it out just to, make it a little bit more even between us and the Vikings in the division since we just beat the Bears last week. They weren't able to do it. Like, being up 14 late in the fourth quarter and going to overtime is never a great sign. But yeah, they made it, a fun game. And then I know there's been a lot of pushback for Matt Eberflus going for 2-point conversion when they were down 14. So to cut the lead to 8, essentially. And the reason people do that, and I know a lot of people are like, that's the dumbest thing ever, he needs to be fired. That is 100% statistically, analytically the right call because you go for 2 then, and if you get it, you can win the game on a field goal, or you go for 2 a second time, and going for 2 is statistically a 50% chance of getting it. So you do it twice, statistically you're going to get one of them. So it's 100% the right way. If you're down 14 in the fourth quarter and you score, you go for 2 11 times out of 10.
Exactly. That's one of the new analytical things that you've seen really coming out over the last 5 years that a lot of people are up in arms like that's dumb, but I agree it makes too much sense. Because if you get that first one, you set yourself up with a much better chance to win the game. And if you don't, that second time statistically you get it. And if you can't convert either of them, you didn't deserve to win the game anyway.
Yeah. And someone else would probably question, should they went to do for 2? That's one Dan Quinn. I don't even
The
do we
ending
have
to this
time to
game
talk
in
about
general.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with this game.
I believe it was 13-10 with 5 minutes
13-9.
left.
It was like
13-9 with 5 minutes left in the game. It did not go to overtime, and it ended 34-26.
Yep.
What?
Yeah, it was such a wild game. The Turpin special teams, the the Commanders finally get going, go down. Turpin really hits them with a heartbreaker kick return. They get the ball back, they go down. Then the Terry McLaurin play, how does that happen? Terry McLaurin looks like he had a great fantasy week. He had one good play. He went from 4 points to 18 points in half point PPR. Looks like he
Yep.
was fantastic. Fantastic. Then after that, they go for the onside kick with 17 seconds left or whatever. And instead of just recovering it and going down and ending the game, they score and only put them up 8 to give them a chance. I was praying that they would have got that Hail Mary. And if I know there was a little bit of pressure, but if he could have stepped up to the line of scrimmage because he drifted so far back, he could have got that ball to the end zone. And if that game felt like it should have just went to overtime, and I would have loved to have seen it. But as an Eagles fan, you're probably happy it separates you in the division from the Commanders, makes the Cowboys have a worse draft pick as we move forward.
It was a win-win for Eagles fans.
The worst part about that game was I missed the first 5 plays of the Packers game because it took so long.
I mean, from a Packers fan perspective, sure. I mean, and I guess the last couple of seconds of that game were pretty irrelevant. I mean, once you
It was a Hail Mary attempt,
Cowboys, yeah, but I just think you kind of glazed over that Austin Seibert hits a 51-yard field goal with a minute 40 left, and then they get the ball back, and McLaurin scores an 86-yard touchdown and misses an extra point. I think you kind of glazed over the missed extra point to be why.
Sorry,
that's
there was so much
game.
to try to remember what happened off the top of the dome. That's how crazy the game was back
when
and forth.
Your kicker kicks a 51-yarder and then you get this ridiculous play, and the Commanders, who have had this all season and that the Hail Mary and everything else, it feels like a destined season for them almost in some ways, to miss that extra point is just
the second one of the day.
Painful. Yeah.
Coming back from injury, that's why I thought the 2 was in play. You just had that big play, you have the momentum. The Cowboys are going what the heck just happened? How do you not have a play to go win the game right there? You have all the momentum. Your kicker's already missed 1 extra point. He's coming off of an injury. I literally said from the moment, as soon as he crossed line, I said, go for 2. And they cut to Dan Quinn holding up the 1 saying we're going for 1. I was like, I don't like that. And then he ended up missing the kick.
Yeah. And just to add even more craziness, you did have the missed extra point. Jaden Daniels got a 2-point conversion earlier in the fourth quarter. And I shouldn't even really say earlier. That was part of what made it 20-17. And then Brandon Aubrey in this game missed a kick, which he never does. So just everything that could have happened that was not normal for either of these two teams happened.
Yeah, and I mean, but long term, now the Commanders, they've lost 3 in a row after starting out so strong.
Yep.
And something I saw on the internet today that I didn't put together, but it raises the question: if you remember when Cliff Kingsbury, who is the Commanders' offensive coordinator, how many times the Cardinals started 6-0, started out hot, and then just completely fell apart in the second half. And now we're kind of seeing that again with the Commanders. could this be a Cliff Kingsbury problem as much as it is the Commanders, overseeding or doing more on expectations than we thought going into the season?
Could you imagine? I mean, it would be hard to, I think, pinpoint that happening, especially because, like, yeah, their offense has struggled a little bit, but it's a very small sample size. If you start seeing it, keep going negatively, maybe he ends up being fired at the end of the season because we do pinpoint as a Cliff Kingsbury thing. But
There's no way
that
he's
would be
fired
crazy.
this
No,
year. But like it's just something to keep an eye on. Like if they do fall apart, everyone be like, well, no one expected them to get 7 wins. They're gonna retool, add a couple more pieces, they're gonna come back. And it should be something to follow next year. Like if they start out hot and then fall apart down the stretch again, then I think Cliff comes into a question, but just something to keep in the back of your mind.
and it is also worth noting, Commanders haven't had their bye yet. They're not really locked into a playoff spot yet either. We talk about that NFC West being tough. Both the Seahawks and Cardinals are only 1 game behind them. And you've got the Buccaneers still sitting around there, the 49ers, the Rams. Like, there's some ground to make up for those teams, but it's not over. Like, the Commanders aren't locked into a wild card spot. And I mean, the division, they would have to win that other game against the Eagles and get some luck there as well. But that seems pretty long shot at this point.
Yeah. It definitely that was a big loss for them because, and the Seahawks winning went from a 3-game lead to a 1-game lead. So definitely he's going to make it interesting down the stretch. But you had to bring up Austin Seibert missing a field goal. How about Kaimi Fairbairn missing a 28-yard game tying field goal to send this to overtime after the Texans already scored a go-ahead touchdown that was called back by a little bit of a suspect hold. Like it was holding, so like you can't. And I've definitely seen the Titans, be on the wrong side of some bad calls this year too. So like it happens. But Nico Collins scores a touchdown. They don't get it. They end up, having to do the field goal. He misses a 28-yarder in a game where he set the record for most 50-plus yarder field goals made in the season. Like terrible witching hour for special teams.
Terrible witching hour for special teams. Terrible season for kickers. Like, I feel like there's been no kicker that's been immune. We came into the season saying, I think more than likely the top 3 kickers in the NFL are Younghoe Koo, Justin Tucker, Jake Elliott. At some point in this season, they've all had some very bad games, and Tucker even a bad season overall. Like, and those were considered the most consistent. You had Brandon Aubrey is probably the next guy on there. He's missed a couple of kicks this year. He doesn't look inhuman like he did last year. Like, these guys that have been around forever have been consistent kickers, missing 28 yarders. I feel like I'm watching Blair Walsh in the snow in Minnesota from how many years ago? Like, and it's every kicker.
Yeah, I don't know how he missed. Like, I don't know how you hook a 28-yarder that bad. Like,
On top of it, how did the Texans have the Titans in this game?
yeah,
I mean, it's divisional. I get that part, but this Texans team has been spiraling. I mean, this all started probably before the Detroit game, but when you pick off Jared Goff 5 times and lose, like, they're finding creative ways to lose games, aren't they?
I mean, go back to Green Bay losing on a last-second field goal in a game they probably should have won. Couldn't beat the Jets on Thursday Night Football. Couldn't beat Detroit. Now you lost the division rival Titans, letting them put up 30 points.
Which I feel like they haven't scored more than 17 all season. I could be wrong there, but
it felt like that for sure. Like it's definitely divisional. You get it. 5 interceptions. They sacked Will Levis 9 times. They had a defensive touchdown and still lost.
9 sacks and a defensive touchdown and lost is pretty much as impressive as 5 interceptions and a loss.
When is the last time a DST in fantasy football gave up 30 points and still had 18 points at the end of the day?
I would have to go back and look. I don't know if that's ever happened.
Yeah.
No, actually, I know when it's happened. It was probably that marathon Rams Chiefs game that was like 50 something to 50 something, but there were multiple defensive touchdowns.
Or the Cowboys Commanders game. The Cowboys, they didn't get quite 30, but 2 special teams touchdowns and some fumbles might have got them there.
Fair, but even yet, such a strange game, such a strange team are the Texans right now.
I saw on Twitter, I wasn't even going to bring it up, but I saw someone on Twitter, which is just crazy to me, put that they missed their quarterback Deshaun Watson in Houston. I was like, bro, we are not there. I get that he was okay
Have they
before
been
all this
watching
stuff.
Cleveland Browns football?
That's what I was like, man. You went from like a terrible franchise to playoffs with this guy. He's had a couple rough games, a little bit of a sophomore slump for CJ Stroud. Relax. He's going to be fine. Be good to go. And they're still winning their division so they're probably still going to make the playoffs. Like,
Yeah. And they're
they
going to be
still,
that 4 seed that no one expects anything out of. But when you get a home playoff game, anything can happen.
yeah, I mean, they're the 2 seed, or not the 2 seed. They have a 2-game lead on the Colts right now. So,
And the Colts just lost a game too. I mean, to the
the
Lions, but
Lions,
the Colts haven't exactly looked great.
no, they have not.
So, so many more things we could get into, I'm sure. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, we're 40 minutes in. We got waivers to get to and Monday night preview, so we should probably get moving.
All right, let's hit some waivers. No buys in week 13. Just looking ahead. That's really nice.
Yes. Sorry, you're like, there was like this weird feedback thing. Might have just been like an internet delay, but it made your voice sound like you had the biggest voice crack in the world through your
Oh,
mics. So I hope
nice.
that came out through air. But yeah, no buys this week, but also means 3 Thursday games and a Friday game. So a lot of interesting places. Like I was looking at I was like, oh, I got to pull this player out of my flex into my starting lineup. I'm like, nope, he's staying in my flex because I got 4 people playing on Thursday. Like it for fantasy, like Thanksgiving can ruin your weekend because you can have if you get Alvin Kamara at 6 touchdowns on Thanksgiving, like
Wasn't that Christmas?
I think it was Christmas. It
Even
was
yet.
still, I think Saquon Barkley might have did on Thanksgiving, or maybe that was Christmas too, but doesn't matter. There's a lot to go on. 3 games. That's what we're going to be here Wednesday, so we can enjoy the holiday with our family, but get you ready for those 4 all week, but mainly those 4 games. But no buys to worry about. But that means you should know who you're going to start, who you're going to play. There are 6 teams on bye in week 14, including the Ravens, Broncos, Texans, Commanders, 4 powerhouse teams you might need to get in. Look ahead, find out who's on waivers now, add them this week for week 14.
Definitely, especially if you're in a must-win situation, mostly for a playoff spot, but even for a bye. Don't ruin your team for a bye, but make sure you're looking ahead at week 13 because there's not a whole lot on the waiver wire to help you kind of long term. I changed our quarterback section to quarterback streams for this week. 2 guys I got on here, Russell Wilson versus Cincinnati, as Cincinnati's pass defense has looked horrible. Even though Russell Wilson's coming off a bad game, you kind of have to put part of that up to the snow as well. Hard to run a passing offense in the snow. And then the other one I have, he's dealing with a little bit of an injury, but I've heard it looks like he's going to be okay on Thanksgiving. Cooper Rush versus the New York Giants because the New York Giants are just dreadful.
Yeah, I think those are some good streaming options as well. And then if you do want someone a little bit more long term, it's not the best matchup this week, but I know Tua is still pretty available out there just because he missed so many games. He's had a really good last 3 weeks. He's starting to find that rhythm that Miami Dolphins offense is starting to hum. It might be a little bit too late as they try to squeak their way back into the playoffs, and it starts Thursday against the Packers. But Tua is a guy that you could look at as well.
Have you seen the man looking over his shoulder meme that is circulating on Twitter right now of Tua looking over at HN and Jonnu Smith and Jalen Waddle, and then the girl standing next to him is Tyreek Hill?
Bro, are you gonna act like I didn't send that to you?
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, and did you see that Tyreek Hill retweeted and was like, "This is how I feel," laughing face emoji?
People read into Tyreek Hill on the internet way too much because Tyreek Hill does this all the time.
Yeah, but Tyreek Hill's gonna have a big game. Probably no Jair Alexander for Green Bay, but
Tyreek Hill's gonna have a big game. Maybe he'll get arrested beforehand. That's the last time he had a big game. I don't know.
let's hope he doesn't get arrested beforehand. Let's
That's a
not
good
put
point.
that out there.
Yeah, we don't need that in the universe. I'm sorry, Tyreek Hill. Wide receivers.
Wide receivers. I mean, Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough out there for a wide receiver right now. Do you buy into the Nick Westbrook Akine, what is it, 5 touchdowns in 6 games or 6 touchdowns in 7 games, something dumb like that? All
Yeah,
big
so
plays.
I love it. All big plays. He's probably that he's that guy that's replacing I'm totally blank. I shouldn't even start the sentence. The guy in New Orleans,
Rashid
Rashid
Shaheed.
Shaheed. Yep, came to my head right as you said it. He's replacing Rashid Shaheed in that kind of role. But when Tyler, who you probably remember, he comes around sometimes. I don't know.
His face is
He's in the
right
middle over there, yeah,
there.
down there under the O in the logo. Yeah, that guy. Um, when he said that he has, was it 6 touchdowns in the last 7 games or whatever it was, something like that, and has like 16 catches on the season, I don't like it, but there's no denying that like he's been effective since the trade of um DeAndre Hopkins. So maybe.
I mean, yeah, I'm still not doing that. Nope. No way, Jose, on that one. Yeah, it's tough out there. Just trying to figure out, like, Keenan Allen, he had a pretty decent day, but he's been inconsistent and probably available. You don't never know which Packers wide receiver to start. And Romeo Dobbs is going to be out with a concussion, so probably Dontavian Wicks this week, just because he's had no action pretty much all season. But outside of that, yeah, there's not a ton of wide receivers that I like outside of maybe Adam Thielen. Now that he's back, if he's available, he was probably in someone's IR spot, but just because he was a Panther, a little bit older, that could be a guy that you might want to grab, as they have, you expect them to have to throw the ball. They have the Buccaneers, so they're probably going to have to put up points to match Baker Mayfield. So he seems to be the go-to target at least.
I mean, we saw Deontay Johnson have some great games before. I mean, that was when Andy Dalton was in, but we've seen Bryce Young looking better since he's been back.
Well,
So
I
he's
mean,
been good enough to actually sustain a restartable fantasy wide receiver.
yeah, and we talked about Leggett being an option a couple weeks ago. Jalen Coker was an option for a little bit,
He
but
was even
now
a healthy
Thielen's back.
scratch this week, because
Right.
Thielen's back. So
So that's what I was getting at. Thielen is the guy. And then
yeah,
just check
so I
your
like
Browns
Thielen.
receivers too, if Judy and or
Mhm.
Tillman are still available.
Again, not as good of a game for Winston and the passing offense there, but they were in the snow. And Nick Chubb took over. But I still think long term, those Browns wide receivers have some value.
Yeah, and in terms of streams, they have the Broncos this week, so it's not a great matchup to play them either.
Yeah. So, but you're also in a situation where you shouldn't need them. No buy.
Right.
Week 14, start them up.
Now you're gonna make me go look at the Week 14 Browns schedule. While you can start talking about running backs, because while that loads,
I don't have a single running back name on here because there's just nobody that's really standing out to me. I could have put Ray Davis on here. I could have put Cam Akers on here, but really they don't have any standalone value. So I just put handcuffs. What I'm trying to do is go out there where I have situations where I don't really need those bench guys that are depth that I'm not going to play anyway, and trying to grab backups for my guys that would at least be effective backups if that guy's out. So I'm just protecting myself at this point at the running back position.
yeah, and I think that's the best thing to do. And we've talked about this. Sometimes the best move is no move and let your league mess up and drop somebody,
Yeah.
and then you go ahead and pick them up because your waiver's higher or you didn't spend all your fab. But I mean, heck, if you're playing right now, and Gus Edwards is out there because they haven't played yet, sure. If you can go out there and get some of these teams that were on by this week before the waiver system, depending on how your league works, I like that. But yeah, there's no running back that I'm going out there and desperately chasing. There's not one that I definitely want on my team. Like, it's just not been great for running backs. They've been pretty inconsistent. And the more you think about it, like even like the elite ones, right? Like Saquon Barkley. You're not that confident if it's Ken Walker. Like, you probably play him based on opportunity, but you're not that confident.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry, you're not that confident in Justice Hill. You probably play him because of opportunity, but you're not that confident. Josh Jacobs. Yeah, maybe Emmanuel Wilson. Probably not. Like, even a lot of these teams that have their quote unquote handcuffs are not in love with the opportunity or how, because their offense is so reliant on that player that you think other things will change and it'll go in different directions if one of those players were to go down.
And you mean Kenny Gainwell, not Ken Walker, by the way, for behind Saquon Barkley. But just want to make sure no one out there got confused.
I appreciate you correcting me.
I got you. But even when you look at like some top 10 running backs that have just like kind of been inconsistent. Achan's down there, but I think a lot of his bad games were without Tua. Kyron Williams has not been close to as good over the last 4 weeks as he was at the beginning of the season. 10, 8, 8, 11, as opposed to his 15 plus pretty much every week before that. Chuba Hubbard, is a top 10 running back, but they have Jonathan Brooks back. Obviously, going to get a lot of work. They were playing the Chiefs, so it's a little tough, but like I'm concerned about his long-term outlook. Like the running back position in general has just kind of been taking a hit this year, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard place out there, but like you said, luckily no teams on buys this week, and we'll have to deal about that next week, and maybe somebody will come to the forefront when we do waivers then.
Exactly. So keep an eye out, see who gets dropped. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday, and you can drop any questions you have in the comments as well. Tight end position, we mentioned Jonnu Smith a little bit already here. Check your waiver wire, see if he's still out there. And then the other guy I have on here is Zach Ertz. Just like he's not an exciting play, but I mean, inconsistent, but he had some volume.
What about your boy, Taysom Hill?
I got tired of beating the Taysom Hill drum on you, so I just left it off this time. But yes, Taysom Hill, play him. Opportunity.
George says Cole Kmet on Thanksgiving, give him a turkey leg.
I don't like Cole Kmet.
Cool. Defenses streams for this week.
We got Thanksgiving, the Cowboys against the New York Giants. I mean, that Cowboys defense, I'm not lying, has been pretty bad, but they're still a defensive opportunity. Get a lot of turnovers. The Giants starting Tommy Cutlets, I think there's a chance that they get a couple of turnovers, a couple of sacks, put together a decent week. Seahawks against the New York Jets, just because we like picking on New York teams at this point because their offenses have been pretty much stagnant. And then this is one that I actually took advantage of in a league, and I feel like I wish I would have mentioned it more last week. The Cardinals, they had Seattle last week, and then Minnesota, and then Seattle again. It's tough playing a team 2 games in 3 weeks, but Seattle's offense, as good as they've been playing, has been giving up a lot of points to defenses. Cardinals had 13 this week. Look at them again against Minnesota, who good team, but they've been giving a lot of points to defenses, and then Seattle again.
Yeah, and I would just the team we talked about the last 2 weeks because of their 3-game stretch. I'll throw them back out there. The Texans against the Jags.
Exactly. So plenty of options on the defensive stream front this week if you're somebody who's been doing that.
For sure. I think that just means we have to preview this Monday night game that kicks off in just about an hour. And just because I jumped on Twitter to look at the inactives as we get ready for that segment, I saw a screenshot. 5:21 left. It was 13-9 in the Cowboys Commanders game.
Absolutely ridiculous. There were so many points scored in that fourth quarter, it outscored some full games.
Yeah, that's not wrong. Which is crazy.
Should we start Monday Night Preview with a question?
Yeah.
Cool. We have a question here. Hey, y'all, I had a question. Would you all start Ladd or Quentin Johnston in tonight's game? Full PPR. They're also playing Herbert, and they're playing against Herbert. And it's a tie game.
I would play Ladd. I think he is I think he'll have more targets, more catches, and hopefully that equates to the yards and the touchdowns, where Johnston tends to be more of the bigger play guy. So, like, I would play Ladd in that situation.
Full PPR, I feel like you want to get the guy that's getting more catches, especially if you're playing against the quarterback and you're trying to get your receiver to outscore that quarterback. I would go Ladd as well. It is really hard to have a wide receiver outscore their quarterback in fantasy.
Yeah, because what you need is them to get a rushing touchdown, basically.
Yeah, or get a bazillion catches for no yards.
In full point PPR, you can get a couple yards, but yeah, I'm still going Ladd. I think he gives you the best chance for this one, and he likes to play, in the middle of the field. And it is worth noting that the Ravens are going to be without Roquan Smith this week in this matchup, so could leave some more openings in the middle of the field for the Los Angeles Chargers.
So yeah, we agree. Go with Ladd. Good luck in that. Hope he outscores Herbert for you. If not, I hope it's not something that really hinges your playoff chances in the last few weeks.
For sure. But as I mentioned, Roquan Smith is the big inactive for the Baltimore Ravens. We don't tend to talk a lot of defensive players, but he is the captain, middle of the field guy on that defense that has been susceptible to the pass and the run already. To lose their top guy does stink. And then there's not really anybody of name missing from the Los Angeles Chargers. They are missing Denzel Perryman, their linebacker. DJ Chark, I think he's been inactive in most games, but we always love bringing up a DJ Chark do on the show when we can. So not a lot of names outside of Roquan Smith in a game that has an over under of 51. The Chargers are 2.5 point underdogs. I think this is going to be a really great game. The Harbaughs brothers going against each other. I think this is a lot of fun. What are your thoughts, since you are basically our resident Chargers fan?
You say I'm a resident Chargers fan and my wife's a Ravens fan. This is a good time.
I was going to say, and our resident Eagles fan too, or Ravens fan.
Yeah. Okay.
Dang it, I made that.
Yeah. No. But this game, I think not having Roquan Smith plays a big deal when you're talking about the run game for the Chargers, and the Chargers are a run first team. So I'm expecting a pretty big day out of J.K. Dobbins and maybe even a decent game out of Gus Edwards, on top of the fact that both of them are playing in a revenge game. Can't forget that as well. We love revenge game narratives here. But the Ravens have mostly been susceptible to the pass. Their run defense has been weak, but not really been too bad. This is a big hit because Roquan Smith does a great job of plugging holes and making tackles. So interested to see how their defense can rebound. The over-under of 51, I think, is a very fair number because not only are the Chargers going to, are playing a defense that has holes, but the Ravens' offense is explosive. The only thing that's been stopping the Ravens so far this season has been the amount of penalties called against them.
Yeah, I still like the under on this one. I think people don't realize how good the Chargers defense has been, just because they're not have been in the limelight despite being 7-3. I think this game 2 weeks against the Chiefs, people are starting to recognize that they win this game. That game with the Chiefs could end up having some. There's still a chance to win the AFC West. So only it being at 7-3. So I think the Chargers can be a fun game. And the real thing we have to watch, though, as you brought this up, is how well was the SoFi Field held up since they just played Sunday Night Football on it last night.
I'm interested to see how many people come up with paint from the field on their jerseys, but I think I just mentioned that one on Thursday show. But no, that's a really good point that I think they do have a real grass turf mix or something like that. So I'm interested to see if it does hold up pretty well. I'm not super worried about it. That stadium is normally very well kept, and they've spent billions of dollars on it. But I guess something to keep an eye on.
For sure. All right, George, you know what time it is. I need your prediction.
See, I think this is going to be a high-scoring one, but it's going to be one of those that I've seen this with Ravens games a lot. They struggle. They might fall behind a little bit. And then in the third or fourth quarter, Lamar Jackson scores 4 touchdowns on 4 drives. It happens. He's a quarterback that gets hot. And when he gets hot, you can't stop him. So I'm going to go 34-30 Ravens.
34-30 Ravens. So you
that would be the over.
Smash the over and Ravens with the point. So I love it. We love getting George's prediction and see how they play out. Anything else you want to talk about for this wild week 12?
So many more things we could touch on, but I think I am good. I'm looking forward to being back here in a few days. We can talk about this game if it is as wild as I call it, and look forward to some family, food, and football on Thursday.
Definitely, George. I think that will be it for us on this episode of the Couch. Guys, make sure you're following us on social at the Couch GMs, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and X. And remember, scheduling note, we will be live on Wednesday at 6:30 this week, not Thursday, because we will be in our food coma by that point. So Wednesday, getting you ready for the Thursday slate and all of week 13. Can't wait. I'm Cody Rocap. That's George Kurth, and we'll talk to you in 2 days.